everybody, and welcome to your Top Think Tanks review. I am your host, Bryce Dolan. Today we're going to cover 5 of your top 50 top United States think tanks, and we're going to follow an article from each think tank. First, we begin with the Center for American Progress by revisiting the pending extradition of Fedor Guerin. Next, the American Enterprise Institute discusses sharing risks on student loans. Then, the Manhattan Institute tells us that the Education Department has permanently shut down ITT Tech schools. Next, the Pew Research Center shows us the widest divide between Americans on the issue of terrorists' ability to attack the United States. Then we will end the show with Human Rights Watch visiting President Duterte once again in the Philippines. Now first, the Center for American Progress reminds us of a deadly failed military coup in Turkey mid-July. More than 270 people were killed and thousands more were wounded in clashes related to the attempted overthrow of the elected government. The outpouring of anger and emotion from Turks of all political backgrounds is natural. Without question, those behind the coup attempt must be brought to justice and face trial. As the coup attempt unfolded through the night of July 15th, Turkish officials quickly pointed to Fedor Guerin and his followers, generally referred to collectively as Gürenists or the Hizmet movement, as the driving force behind the overthrow plot. Now, Guerin, an Islamic scholar and United States permanent resident, has been living in a compound in rural Pennsylvania since his self-imposed exile from Turkey in 1999. Now, he has been rarely seeing outside visitors and grants very few interviews. Guerin's movement has set up schools in hundreds of countries, including the United States, and established cultural exchange programs, business associations, and media outlets. Now, Turkish officials and the public are absolutely convinced of Guerin's personal complicity in the coup attempt, and the request for his extradition is a primary element of Turkey's response to the crisis. Now, despite the gravity of the wider issues surrounding the coup attempt of Turkish politics and society, the potential extradition of Guerin is pursued under the treaty between Turkey and the United States. Now, the political ramifications for the United States policy and relations with Turkey must be considered when thinking about going through with this extradition. Now, a Turkish foreign minister stated that relations will naturally suffer if the United States does not give us the head of a terrorist organization who resides in that country. A delegation of Turkish parliamentarians from 3 of the 4 major Turkish political parties made the same argument during a recent visit to Washington, D.C., comparing Guerin to Osama bin Laden. On August 10th, President Erdogan again raised the stakes, saying that sooner or later the U.S. will need to make a choice. The United States, has to make a choice. So we'll keep an eye on Turkey and this request to extradite Fedor Guerin back to Turkey. Now, next we go with Andrew P. Kelly of the American Enterprise Institute. He shed some light on higher education accountability. Higher education accountability has climbed towards the top of the federal policy agenda. The federal government shells out more than $150 billion in grants and loans to colleges and universities annually, but asks comparatively little in return regarding student outcomes. Now, in the face of sharp tuition increases, stagnant student completion rates, and delinquency rates on student loans that rival those on subprime mortgages in 2008, policymakers are under pressure to demand more of our nation's colleges and universities. Now, existing federal policies designed to hold institutions accountable fall short of ensuring that taxpayer dollars are well spent. Colleges rarely lose federal aid eligibility for any reason, and access to grants and loans props up schools that would not pass a market test if students had to pay their own. Now, the key is to find an approach that is simple, transparent, but difficult to game, and that applies to all institutions. One idea is a bipartisan transaction is risk sharing or risk retention. The notion that institutions should bear some fraction of the financial risk when their students fail to repay their loans after school. Now, risk retention is common in other areas of lending, and research suggests that lenders behave differently when they have quote-unquote skin in the game. Now, risk retention is common in other lending markets, and having even a small stake, for example, a 3% stake in a loan, the loan performance seems to affect lender behavior. Now, the idea here is to give colleges not just with those with high default rates, but stronger incentive to focus on keeping tuition affordable and promoting the success of their students. To be sure, many colleges already promote these goals as part of their mission. For those that charge high tuition for programs of dubious value, a risk-sharing policy would give them a reason to consider changes to institutional practice, resource allocation, and tuition pricing. Now, importantly, that policy would not dictate the remedies that colleges would have to adopt, but leave those details really up to them. Institutions might respond by adjusting their admission standards, working to contain costs, and lower tuition, rethinking practices, programs, and policies, or some combination of the two. Now, risk sharing will be controversial with colleges and universities, as all accountability ideas are. Unlike other plans like the college ratings, though, it has the advantage of being simple, transparent, and non-binary. So, a possible higher education accountability solution could be on the table here with risk sharing or risk retention. But you can look more into that if you'd like, if you want to follow this article in the link below. Now, staying in the realm of education, the Manhattan Institute tells us that the for-profit giant ITT Technical Institute is shut down for good. With over 130 locations serving more than 45,000 students, this comes on the heels of its announcement last week that it would no longer enroll new students, which in turn followed the Department of Education's move to bar it from receiving federal financial aid such as student loans and Pell Grants. Now, the department demonstrated its ability to bring down a school in a matter of weeks. The department required ITT Tech's parent company to post a letter of credit worth $153 million on top of the $94 million the school had already posted to provide a buffer against closed school discharges. Now, at the same time, the department forbade the school from enrolling new students on federal student aid. The double hit, cutting off the school's main source of revenue while dramatically boosting their collateral requirements, was predictably too much for the school to survive. Now, while the department can issue new regulations to proactively curtail lending to questionable colleges, one wonders whether it can ever be an effective steward of taxpayer dollars so long as it has no real incentive to do so. In reality, only private sector lenders can provide real accountability to colleges. After all, if a private lender makes too many bad loans, it goes out of business. But under the current system, the government originates more than 90% of new student loans. The ITT Tech disaster shows us just how terrifying the results of the status quo can be. So, some new news with that ITT Tech school coming in and closing all of their locations all over the country. Will we see this happen with more universities like ITT Tech? Maybe. I don't know. But we'll keep an eye out and see. But next, the Pew Research Center delivered a survey on possible terrorist strikes on the United States 15 years now after 9/11. Their findings show partisan differences over the ability of terrorists to launch major attacks on the United States, and gaps are now as wide as any point dating back to 2002. Now, currently, 40% of the public says that the ability of terrorists to launch major attacks on the United States is greater than it was at the time of the 9/11 attacks, which is the highest share expressing this view over the past 14 years. About a third, 31%, say terrorist abilities to attack are the same as at the time of 9/11, while just 25% say their ability to initiate a major attack is less than at that time. Now, the latest national survey by Pew Research Center, conducted August 23rd through September 2nd among 1,201 adults, finds that the growth in the belief that terrorists are now better that are now better able to launch a major strike on the U.S. has come almost entirely among Republicans. Today, 58% of Republicans view the ability of terrorist attack as greater than at the time of 9/11, up 18 percentage points since November 2013. Now, only about a third of independents and a little less than a third of Democrats say terrorists are now better able to strike the United States than they were then, and these are similar to 3 years ago. Now, the current survey also finds that partisan differences in views about the trade-off between protection from terrorism and civil liberties are as large as at any point in more than a decade as well. Currently, 49% of Americans say their bigger concern about the government's anti-terrorism policies is that they have not gone far enough to protect the country, while 33% say their bigger concern is that those policies have gone too far in restricting civil liberties. Now, we're going to end the show with Human Rights Watch and Philippine President Duterte. There has been some changes in the promoted violence in the Philippines. If you remember, in the beginning of this summer, Philippine President Duterte issued a license to kill to authorities and civilians alike to kill suspected drug traffickers, drug users, addicts, not even people who were confirmed addicts, sellers, or anything, just suspects. And since then, over thousands of people have been killed. But unfortunately, these changes in the promoted violence in the Philippines is not a change for the good. Last week on September 2nd, unidentified assailants bombed a popular night market in Davao City, while President Duterte, the city's former mayor, was in town. Now, the horrific attack killed at least 14 people and wounded more than 60. The Islamist armed group, Abu Sayyaf, claimed responsibility. Now, the next day, the president said it was his duty to protect the country and declare a state of lawlessness. It has been formally proclaimed as a state of national emergency on account of lawless violence. Now, he made clear that it's not martial law, but I am inviting now the military and the police to run the country according to my specifications. They can do what they really need to do until such time that I can say it is safe. Now, even under a president who respected human rights, calling on the military to carry out law enforcement duties would be troubling. Soldiers are trained and equipped to kill enemy fighters on the battlefield. Military police aside, they are not a suitable force for carrying out law enforcement operations against civilians in a rights-respecting manner. Now, Mr. Duterte's declaration of a state of lawlessness appears less intended to bolster an overwhelmed police force or deploy the military in a counterinsurgency operations, but rather to justify and expand the bloody path down which he has already taken the country. There is a crisis in this country involving drugs, extrajudicial killings, and there seems to be an environment of lawlessness, lawless violence, he said in his September 3rd statement. The military needs a bigger role because these are extraordinary times. The immediate danger is that the Philippine military will be added to the combustible mix of trigger-happy police and vigilantes who, with Mr. Duterte's encouragement, have gunned down men, women, and children on the streets, inside their homes, and in detention centers after arrest. So there has been some change down in the Philippines to the violence towards drug users, drug traffickers, drug sellers, drug lords, but it's not a good change. Now, instead of the police, which have killed over 700 people since the beginning of this summer, and like they said, the trigger-happy vigilantes, you now have the military coming in to help control the situation. So, unfortunately, Obama couldn't do anything on his recent visit to Laos because President Duterte would not listen. But hopefully we can see some changes for the good here really soon. Well, thank you for watching, everybody. You can find the links to all these articles below in the description. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. But this was your Top Think Tanks review, and I was your host, Bryce Dolan.